Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Okay. Sherry Butler is excused. Kyler Cox.
Here, on Zoom.
Christopher Gallagher.
Here.
Ed Heil is excused. Ashley Pasquale.
Here.
Todd Taylor.
Here.
Scott Welty is excused. Natalie Schrader. Here. And Councilmember Michelle Lynn is excused.
Okay, thank you. And at this
Yes,
time, yes,
Okay, sorry.
we can hear you.
Gotcha.
All right. At this time, we will have a call to the public. If any members of the public would like to address the board on something not on the agenda, you can wait till the public hearings if you want to address something specific.
Good evening. My name is David Diaz. How many people came to the public meeting at the Aquatic Center? Do you remember how many people were there?
During call to the public, we can't have a two-way conversation.
Okay, was there? Okay.
Sorry,
My only concern is we're having these meetings. There's, I don't know, 5 people here tonight. At the last meeting they came to for this, we don't even have our Parks and Recreation people here other than the 3 that are here, and that there's a Zoom. But there was 4 people in the audience, 3 council members, the mayor, in fact, 5, and myself. So I think if we're going to be doing public outreach, we need to do a better job of getting the word out and not make any final decisions on this Diggs project at the what we're talking about until we really reach out to the public and not say we have a couple of meetings and we're good. That's just my own personal opinion. I hear that same thing from a lot of constituents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't see anyone else coming up, so we'll move on to approval of the November 22nd meeting minutes.
A motion to approve the meeting minutes from the November 22nd.
Thank you.
I second that.
Was that Todd?
Yeah, Todd.
All right, awesome. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And I'm in favor as well. All right, thank you. And now we will move on to our staff report. Mr. Keene.
Thank you. Learn to swim lessons begin on February 1st. The Sheriff's Department will have a training in water rescue on February 7th. Our after-school program will be coming to the pool for after-school swim February 19th and February 24th. The Sea Scouts will be doing a training in the pool on February 5th, 12th, and 19th. The pool will be open on February 21st, President's Day, for lap swim and exercise classes from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. And kinder swim will begin on February 28th. In the community center, the concert series has started, so we have a lot of concerts going on in February. Voyager, a tribute to Journey concert, will be on January 26th. ABBA Fab tribute concert, February 2nd. Garth Brooks Live tribute concert, February 3rd. Havasu Night Out neighborhood watch meeting will be held on February 9th. The Landshark concert, February 12th. Listen to the Music tribute to the Doobie Brothers concert on February 13th. Ultimate Chicago tribute concert, February 18th. Van Halen, a tribute to Van Halen, will be on February 19th. Piano Man, a tribute to Elton John and Billy Joel, February 22nd. Randy Linder Tribute to Credence Clearwater Revival on February 23rd, and the Mark Hahn Dinner Banquet on February 26th. Flag football tournament will be held at Rotary Park on February 5th and 6th. The 5th annual Lake Havasu City Disc Golf Open will be held at Sarah Park on February 5th and 6th. Winterfest will be held on McCulloch February 12th and 13th. Lake Havasu City 4th Grade Water Festival will be held at the Island Ball Field on February 15th. Winter Blast at Sarah Park will be held February 17th through the 20th. Lake Havasu City Brews and Brats will be held on the parcel in McCulloch February 26th. Triple Crown will be holding a softball tournament at Sarah Park and Dick Sant Park on February 26th and 27th. Tomorrow night, City Council will be appointing a new member to our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board to fill the current vacancy. And then as part of my director's report, I'm going to turn it over to the MPO director, who will give a brief update on a few projects from the Bicycle Pedestrian Plan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Justin Hembry. I am the director of the Lake Havasu Metropolitan Planning Organization. And Mike had asked me to come tonight and just give you a brief update on the Bicycle Pedestrian Plan. This plan was conducted in 2018, which was quite a few years ago. Since then, I just wanted to provide an update on several projects. And apologies for those on Zoom. We have a handout, and I'll try to summarize the best I can. In that project list from the Bicycle Pedestrian Plan, 3 projects I highlighted. The first one was London Bridge Road, Fathom Drive to SR 95. The second one was London Bridge Road in the vicinity of Windsor Beach. So just to provide an update, the Lake Havasu MPO applied for what they call Highway Safety Improvement or Safety Grant funds through the state. We were awarded a project on London Bridge Road that covers from Raymere Drive all the way to SR 95, so about 3-mile stretch. And that project is to basically go in and obliterate the existing striping and to do what we call a road diet, which is restripe the lanes and make them a little bit narrower so you get a larger shoulder/bike lane. So we basically addressed project number 1 and 6 in the table 17 from the Bike Pedestrian Plan. So that is good news. Another project that the MPO was awarded for the highway safety grants was Acoma Boulevard at Swanson, in design in FY23 and construction in FY24. And let me backtrack a little bit too. For the London Bridge Road, when I say that we awarded these funds, it takes time because they're federal projects. So design is going to happen in fiscal year 23, construction in 24. So it's still a few years out, but the money is on the books. We do have that eligibility letter from the state that says you were awarded those funds. For Acoma Boulevard, it's a traffic signal there. There's also some sidewalk improvements, some ADA ramp improvements, also a flashing beacon similar to what they call a pedestrian hawk signal, where if a pedestrian hits the button, it flashes, lets you know that they're there. That's also been awarded and again, should be constructed in 24. Projects that we have pending and or waiting for legislative approval are Swanson Avenue from Lake Havasu Avenue to Smoke Tree Avenue. This currently is in a House bill that was introduced by some of the House representatives. It's a basic mill and fill project from Lake Havasu Avenue up to Smoke Tree on Swanson. Again, this would just be a pavement preservation project where they go in, very much what they just did on McCulloch, where they tear up the asphalt, they repave, but there's opportunities that when they restripe, that they can accommodate for a bicycle lane, similar to what they did on Swanson from Smoke Tree to Acoma in a previous Lake Havasu MPO project. Again, they're probably going to update the ADA ramps on that. It's still kind of up in the air. It's at the legislative process right now. It's been introduced, but session is not over. So nothing guaranteed. It's just a pending piece of legislation. For grant applications, we have 3 more safety applications in the works that, if awarded, they would take place in fiscal year 25-26. One is on McCulloch Boulevard to basically resurface and provide wider markings and speed feedback signs. Speed feedback signs are the ones where they basically show the speed limit sign and directly underneath it flashes with the LED and lets you know your speed. It's just a deterrent to help slow people down. It's not an enforcement tool. There's no cameras, just a please be aware of your speed type installation. For Swanson Avenue, we have Wing Loop, Mariposa Drive, and then Wing Loop again. That application is for rapid flashing beacons and high visibility crosswalks. Again, something similar to a hawk signal or LED flashing sign to just let you know that the pedestrian is in the walkway. And then the last application is for the Horizon 6 area for Gold Springs, Blue Canyon Road. That's to widen the pavement 3 feet in total and then restripe so they have wider shoulders. There have been some pedestrian accidents up in that area over the last few years, and that application would hopefully address that. So again, the McCulloch Boulevard, Swanson Avenue intersection, and Horizon 6, those are pending safety grant applications, and then the Swanson Avenue is pending legislation. That's going to be a legislative project. As far as future opportunities of where do we go from here, what do we do with the bike pedestrian plan, how do we get more projects, how do we get more funding? The Biden administration had just recently passed the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, or IIJA, and in the next 5 years, there's going to be a lot of funding, federal funding, coming through the state to the various COGS and MPOs. What that looks like, what those opportunities are, it's still in the works. We don't know. Typically what happens with state and federal grants is they will release what they call a notice of funding opportunity, and that's basically a call for projects or opens up the opportunity to apply for the grant funding. So the MPO will take the existing bike pedestrian plan, our other long-range plans, and anything that relates to bicycle or pedestrian improvements, and we will heavily pursue any grants that we can, with the caveat that most of these grants are for our local agencies, which would be the city or the county, and it's part of the process is coming up with actual local match or local dollars. Most of these projects aren't funded at 100%. It's an 80% federal match and 20% local. So if we had $1 million federal project, the local city would have to come up with a couple $100,000 on their own. So just throwing that out there. It's not always sunshine and rainbows with federal funding. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do any members of the board have questions for Mr. Embry? Is that your last name?
Hembry, yes, Mr. Hembry.
Thank you. Or Mr. Keene?
Unfortunately, I do.
Okay, go for it.
I'm curious about the, assuming there's a method of prioritizing these 24 odd projects. Is this in any way a list in order of priority, or is there a priority list, and how do you go about determining what's first on the burner?
So to answer your question, yes, there is a prioritization process, and it typically varies from plan to plan, but at the end of the day, it's usually comprised of an advisory committee such as this that makes recommendations to the board. The advisory committee is comprised of engineers, planners, your public works director, your city managers, and also it's a data-driven approach. So if it's bicycle pedestrian, London Bridge Road, that might be something that as we do a public involvement piece, and we hear a lot of the community saying, well, I ride my bike up and down London Bridge Road more than anywhere else. And then it's also not only data and public comment driven, but just a logical approach to, we look at where are the other existing bike and pathways or trails, and where's the biggest return on our investment. So kind of some low hanging fruit. I know out in the county, London Bridge Road, they had done some of their bike restriping to get in their bike lanes. So that was the next extension of that, was just go ahead and continue that in the city. But as far as in the future, as we do these planning processes, the prioritization is definitely key, and it's usually driven by data and or the public's input.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Keene, I always appreciate your report, but I know a few of us were dying to hear a little bit about Christmas break and how that went.
Christmas break
Off the top of your head.
went well. There were a lot of staff and a lot of participants out during that time, as continues today. Just with all the different flu and virus going around. So, but we did make it through camp successfully, and I would say on average anywhere between 50 to 75% of the participants were there. So.
Anyone else have questions? I have a question for you. Sorry. Should have grabbed you before you sat down. Okay, so the table that you provided us of the projects and their estimated costs are off the 2018 study you
Correct.
referenced?
So inflation has definitely
Okay.
chewed into that budget.
Okay. I guess, is there a timeline when that plan will be revisited to see if these are still the priority projects or what's needed?
So we just got done with our long-range regional transportation plan that includes all modes of transportation, is not just bike. So some of those have been updated.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, to address Mr. Gallagher's comments as far as like the prioritization, I know it seems kind of random of how we're implementing these projects, but the safety grant funds are based off of traffic accident data where serious injuries or fatalities happen. So it's not necessarily that we're cherry picking these projects off of this list based off of our opinion. We see that there's a list of projects and then there's a grant source or other things, and we say, okay, for safety, here are the areas where bicycle and pedestrian accidents are happening. Those are where these improvements need to happen. It just so happens to be concurrent with another list of projects from the bicycle pedestrian plan, if that makes sense. So there's multiple plans out there, multiple prioritized lists, and we're just going after as much funding as we can. And if it happens to be number 5 on the list instead of number 1, it's a grant. If we can get those funding, we will sooner rather than later. But to your point, when do we readdress that? It's ongoing. And so for the IIJA, that federal grant, all those federal funds that are coming out, that's currently what we're working on heavily right now with the state and through various planning organizations is more information. How much funding is coming to the state? What are eligible projects? Who are eligible agencies? What are the match requirements? So it's something that the good news is because that list exists, and last I checked, not too many of those projects have been implemented. They have, but not all of them. 3 or 4 out of 20 there's still room for growth there. Mm-hmm. So we'll take the rest of those projects on that list. And again, if no improvements have been done since 2018, nothing has changed. We will use that list to pursue funding.
Great. I mean, I think it's great to have a list so when funding opportunities become available, you already have something to start with.
And to your point, we would absolutely update that cost estimate with at least some kind of percentage to accommodate for inflation.
Great. And then I just had one more question for you about, you mentioned one of the projects on Swanson Avenue is pending legislation. Does that mean that you're just waiting on the state to formally accept federal dollars, or is it part of a larger bill that's going to fund a bunch of projects, or what kind of legislation is pending?
Sorry, I didn't want to get too far in the weeds.
Okay.
But so Greater Arizona, which is everyone outside of MAG and PAG, Tucson and Phoenix, Greater Arizona came together and put together a list of $50 million for projects all over the state. For Havasu, that was the Swanson Avenue from Lake Havasu Avenue to Smoke Tree with a price tag of just under $1.7 million. So it's basically an omnibus bill that multiple House of Representatives and senators have supported, but we're very much in the early stages of the 2022 legislative session. I believe it is, let me grab my notes real quick. The House bill currently is HB 2396. And again, that's a omnibus bill. It's got great support. We're very excited about it. It's one of the first times that I can remember it wasn't a single project competing against another project somewhere else in the state, but a omnibus of projects with multiple legislators on board. So where we stand with that right now, I'm not sure. I believe that should be introduced to the various committees here in the next week or two. Again, we're right in the middle of legislative session, so time will tell. But there's high hopes for this one. The last, I want to say 6 months, we've had various meetings with our local elected officials, our legislators, and as a group, each year at the annual, the Rural Transportation Summit is what it was called in the past. We met together with at least 13 legislators and introduced that entire omnibus of projects for $50 million, of which Havasu has a project in there.
Great.
And if anybody needs more information, I'd be happy to talk to them. Just reach out to Lake Havasu MPO. We have booklets and project fact sheets for that specific project, and we'll keep everyone apprised of that legislative process. Our main representative and liaison for our legislative process is actually through RTAC, the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, and that is Kevin Adam. He meets with not only Lake Havasu MPO, but our our local elected officials on the regular.
Great. Is there a concurrent Senate bill that you have the number for too, or is it?
I think it's just in that, yeah, it's,
Okay.
yep, it's just at the House right now.
Okay.
If it gets there, we'll be excited.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Okay. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so now we'll move into the public hearings, and the first one is on our Downtown Catalyst project.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dig Studios, and they're going to make a presentation of all the information they've gathered and kind of the design that they're working towards. So, Chad?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right, excellent. I will share my screen and we will get started right away here. All right, well, I hope you can all see the slideshow here. Again, thanks for having us. The purpose that we're coming here back to you again tonight is not with a final product, but with an update. And we want to walk through the process we've been through so far. We anticipate having 30% or what we consider a schematic design package finished in a few weeks. But that obviously entails, what kind of feedback we get here, what kind of revisions we'll make toward that schematic design package, and getting the go-ahead from Mr. Keene and his staff. So I'll jump right into it. One of the things that we want to touch on is obviously not just where the proposed design is, but where the initial concepts kind of started from, the process we went through, some of the things that we've heard, and how those have all been developed and consolidated into the current proposed design. So we want to walk through some of that, and then along with that, we'll get into some of the details, including some of the cost considerations and a discussion from Last Architects to discuss a little bit more detail about shade and structure and canopy proposals. So when we started, we met with the city, we went through sort of a programming exercise, and after some input from the staff, we started to develop multiple concepts. And these concepts drew from various sort of sources of inspiration, as well as just a basic idea about functionality. We knew that the site had to support the existing events and the events that are already activating the space. But we also had some goals in mind about being able to provide better containment, potentially better infrastructure for the site, have a better daily feel for more activation, and also a little bit of a wow and a little bit of excitement about the site to actually attract more events potentially here and be the catalyst for this area that it can be. So with that in mind, we developed 3 different concepts. We got feedback on those concepts, and a couple of the things that we heard really, and based on sort of the intent of each of these, well, it started with the idea that, for instance, on the hub, a simple bold form actually really works in this site. It's not a very large site, and you really want to be able to sort of easily understand. You want a sort of a simple circulation system. But also just something that can tie in with the themes and the forms and the details to Lake Havasu, and feel that way from a material standpoint, and really just sort of what would really sort of be sort of an energetic sort of space when it was activated. We also wanted something that allowed for loading and unloading, and again, easy sort of entrance onto the site, as well as ADA access onto the site. And then this idea of multiple locations potentially, and also multiple orientations for performance events, partly because there's many different scales and sizes of events that happen here. But also because of the different times of day and the times of year, and trying to take advantage of that from a solar perspective and things like that. From a facet standpoint, some of the feedback we got about the concept really got to sort of this fragmented geoform that it had, which was about right-sizing the turf, about how can we create a space that could actually be multiple spaces. When a small group wants to activate the site, can they do so and feel comfortable? Can they actually provide potential containment, whether it's for ticketed events or alcohol sales and things like that? And an easy way to sort of subdivide the site allowed for that to happen, so that different scales of events actually kind of were programmed really easily in the space. And also the thought in this early design for the facets did start to think about future development of the site, phasing of the site. Is there an easy way to create a design that allows for the design to be implemented in phases, or even promotes potential future engagement, and whether that be from a vendor or whether it just be further development of the site as it becomes an actual catalyst? That was sort of part of the idea in the forms that plan took. The confluence idea sort of was developed out of this marrying of a city and sort of a natural system, the city and the river, really. But on this site, it really takes the approach of activating and expanding the street edges and making those, really nice day-to-day spaces, but also with all the street activities and events that happen, how can we actually capitalize those and actually provide, added walking space, added space for potential tents and seating and things along those streets. To take the same approach along the wash, how do we sort of expand that natural feel of the wash? There's a really nice trail on the opposite side of the wash that can allow people to come from the new facility that's being built there, but also the public parking and future transit center that's over there. But how can we activate the other side of the wash that's on the catalyst site, and maybe have more of a natural edge there, or an edge that has a little bit greener feel or something like that. So those were some of the both key responses we got in terms of positive reactions to each of those. But also it really speaks to kind of the programming goals of the site. So these are just a sample of some of the responses we got. We've obviously had multiple sort of engagements, but from the stakeholder engagement we had quite a list of comments. There were several exercises, including sort of red dot, green dot on character imagery and plans, as well as comments that we received. And these are the things that we were reacting to as we looked to sort of modify and refine the concept and the site plan. Some of these are very detailed in nature, and will actually be things that we look back to as we start to include that level of detail in the plan. So as I said, we're heading toward a schematic design plan at this phase of the process, but eventually, some of the detailed tree selections or, furnishing selections or different things like that, as the process gets to a more detailed phase, we will obviously be keeping these comments in mind. So here you see a view of sort of this new consolidated plan. And this takes, again, it's sort of a hybrid of some of the concepts, but at this first glance, you'll see that this hub form, this form that really derives itself from sort of this high-end, high-performance mechanical kind of idea, but at this very large kind of park scale, what it allows itself to be is a very simple and efficient way to sort of bring people together and provide a really focused gathering space in a really simple, bold form. But at the same time, it really starts to provide a kind of a diversity of spaces. What we see in this idea is that we've sort of right-size, again, this main gathering space in terms of what type of gathering spaces would actually use the lawn for people to gather for concerts or other kinds of events, but also what other kinds of materials and what other kinds of spaces can we still provide outside of that area that can be activated. We'll have the ability for loading and unloading and, bringing in tents and things like that. But at the same time, from a cost and a maintenance standpoint, really trying to be efficient with where we put the design. If you see here, we have a sort of a main entrance at intersection of Curio, which is here on the left of this diagram, and McCulloch, which is on the bottom of the plan. And that's sort of that key entry point. And there's a promenade that stretches across the site, and it starts to serve as one of those key which we could subdivide the site for different events. But we can also activate that with food trucks or tents and really start to focus the space. And we do have a few images later that kind of help to show that. Here's a little bit of a simple diagram to kind of describe these things as well. And again, that main promenade that leads from the entry to the Performance Plaza space, it starts to be that key entry point, but we're really focused on several entry points with this plan, including this trail that leads from McCulloch and leads from the wash to the space here in the south area here. And again, I'll kind of switch back here. So you see this trail here that leads in here. And what you'll notice is near this area is where we've currently placed the restroom facilities. And there's several reasons to sort of where we've placed this sort of larger Performance Plaza on the east side and the restroom on the east side. And part of that is sort of an efficient orientation and access, but also trying to be efficient with where we might be connecting to utilities and having efficient utility runs as well. What you'll see on sort of the northwestern Curio side of this is another walkway entrance. But on both sides from Curio and McCulloch, what we have is this sort of expanded streetscape zone. So this inner ring that makes sort of the inner form here is a promenade that loops all the way around. But on both sides, we've really sort of expanded the streetscape with that extra walking zone and extra activation zone as another activation point or access point all along that edge. One other thing you'll note here, and I'll start to sort of go through these individually, this inner promenade that we had a lot of precedence for and is sort of a dual use space. So it's not all hardscape. Part of it is a sort of a DG path, but it allows for walking zone and sort of a nice path around the grass turf edge when activities aren't happening. But that added area of that 12-foot DG promenade that sort of buffers that inner ring allows for food trucks to be brought into the area, fair tents, cars, boats for car shows and things like that. So there's several ways that this walking path can be engaged with the DG promenade for all types of events. And you could see food vendors and other kinds of things happening along there as well. So it's not just the main performance spaces that could be activated. It really is sort of this daily sort of path that could always be activated. And you kind of see a kind of a stripped down version of it here. And what you'll see is sort of this idea that whether it's in a phased way or not, there could start to be a reinforcement of this bold form with the structures. And so here you see a beginning of a colonnade and a sort of a shade element on the south side of the plan. And that's, again, this kind of oblique view of that main promenade that rings the entire site. So this started out from some of the feedback we got about this, expanded walkways and street activation. But it really became an efficient way to circulate around the entire open space And, along with the structures that might be able to reinforce this, it's also an efficient way to provide power infrastructure and lighting and other kinds of things. And here you start to see ideas about, again, different ways to activate the space and really start to get to a multitude of different events that could happen here. One thing I'd like to point out in the background here is another this idea of activating both the turf area, but also sort of the non-turf areas with areas for again setting up larger tents or food trucks or other kinds of things for picnics, and there's different multiple ways you could set up the site at this point. And this is just kind of another brief diagram to talk about those multiple setups for events and the multiple orientations you could potentially have. Some of this would be based on the size of the event. And again, some of it would just be based on time of day or time of year. You can see, again, a view of the site with these kind of spaces outlined. The largest, what we're calling performance space, is the one to the left here on this diagram, which is on the east side of the site. And again, that's scaled pretty much to be able to handle any size of stage that was brought in. We typically want at least a 30 by 40 space that gives you sort of ultimate flexibility for performances of different kinds. Now, again, just to highlight that space sort of on the outside of this main gathering space and the main turf area, a couple of the things that we really wanted to achieve here, again, we wanted sort of a softer edge along the wash, the ability to potentially bring in some more green and some trees along that outside, but we also want to leave a drivable route. From a grading standpoint, this is a bit of a plateau, but we are able to provide access from both Curio and McCulloch at these points. And so to keep this a sort of a constant drivable route, it would be really important. Obviously, from a maintenance and service standpoint, it's a very efficient route because it passes by the performance space on that east side. Also, the restroom could have access from here. At this same point along McCulloch, you would have sort of a drivable access to the inner ring. So what you can see is that all around the site, whether it's going sort of counterclockwise here from this southeast area, you have access into that inner ring with a direct path along the McCulloch. You come up to the intersection, you have another access point to this event space for loading and for people to enter at the intersection. Going up further to the north, there's another access that sort of northwest location. And then all the way around, again, you have access to the performance space. But this space to the north, not only is it sort of an option potentially for phasing, but there's opportunities here for sort of a larger pad. Again, whether this is expansion of some of the park amenities, a development opportunity for a vendor, lots of flexibility here with this space. It wants to be usable day one, but in a really kind of efficient, cost-effective way. And this space also is part of this idea of sort of potential for an expanded connection actually across the wash, which was discussed early on with a bridge. And this design really allows for the space to be activated day one and fully usable, but immediately connected whenever it would need to be from this new location. And again, here just kind of highlighting in the overall site where the proposed restroom room location would be. Right now, from both a cost perspective, but also really just sort of an ease of maintenance and delivery and installation. What we're really looking at is different modular versions of restrooms that could be brought in. And these really have become much nicer in recent years. There's a lot more options. They can come with their own sort of split unit cooling apparatus and other things. And so really the goal here would be to place them in a efficient location in terms of the utilities, and potentially then start to wrap them or look at ways that a canopy or other sorts of elements could start to integrate them into the park make them like a very welcoming structure, something that fits in with the overall design, but in a much more cost-effective way, so we can get these facilities into the plan. And as you've seen from some of the renderings, we started to sort of allude to, the different concepts for shade, but also this idea of a colonnade. And what we're really looking at is where's the most efficient place to sort of put this? We have this dual inner ring of a walkway around the turf gathering space, as well as that sort of outer ring of the DG Promenade. And so we're looking at sort of a colonnade that actually sits right in the middle of these, and as a multifunctional structure that could sort of host the power infrastructure, potentially host the lighting around that area, as well as provide shade in certain instances. Really, it becomes a super efficient, but also it starts to develop the sort of the framework and the context of the space that really strengthens that bold form. And from here, I'll sort of hand it off to the last and to Brad to sort of talk a little bit more about this concept and how it can be used.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So as Chad mentioned, as we were developing shade structures and shade ideas for the hub scheme, we wanted to continue looking at efficient ways of doing it. We wanted to make sure that we were creating the greatest impact and creating the greatest amount of comfort on the site, but we were also cognizant of this idea of creating identity for the site so that it truly does become a destination. And as a destination, we think it really does reinforce this notion of becoming a catalyst. And so things that we were thinking about similar to the planning, we were thinking about with the shade canopy and the structures, which was efficiency, the ability to be phased if the budget warrants it, the ability to create identity, the ability to create flexibility within it. And so the drawing you're seeing here, it's got a lot going on, but it's a very informative drawing in the sense that we are studying how shade moves across the space during the day. This day in particular that we studied was the equinox, so like March 21st. But you can see how the canopy from the right side of the drawing, closer to the east side of the drawing, is more oriented horizontally to be more efficient with sun that is above head. And then as the canopy moves south and to the west, the canopy is slowly organizing and optimizing itself to become more vertical in its stance. And by doing so, you can see that the late day sun, the really harsh sun of the late day, is further blocked by the canopy and creates a lot of shade across the hub, across the lawn where you want it during those times of day. The south canopy in particular, you can see by the density of the shadows, the collected shadows, does the bulk of the work throughout any day, offering shade any time of day, mostly any time of year as well. And so this flexibility, this notion of creating structures and shade that offers variety, that offers coverage throughout a multitude of area, these were the things that we're studying, and these are the things that we are finding successful with this approach. And so as I mentioned, budget is, of course, a concern of ours, and we are designing with that in mind. And we want our designs to be flexible, to be implementable potentially over the course of multiple phases if it comes to that. And so these are studies looking at how the canopies could be part of a phase strategy where over time, the south canopy, maybe that one being the one that gives the most consistent shade, comes in first, and then the west and east canopies can come in subsequent phases as budgets allow. But again, the idea is really just to show you and for us to come up with solutions that offer that type of flexibility from a budgetary and phasing standpoint. This project does not break down if only one canopy can only be erected to start. It remains still viable, it remains strong, and we see that as one of the great kind of selling points of this approach. We also looked at this notion of using the canopy structure, the poles, as potentially a first phase or an early phase, those poles being, as Chad described, potential points for lighting and power. And so this is something else we can explore as we get to the 30% design, the schematic design, and understand the budgetary impacts that our approach has, and how we can go about making sure and implementing day one needs are met, in case, there does need to be a future phase built into this, as we will inevitably come to find out as we move forward.
And so going back to a few of the things that we heard and looking at these views, I mean, we really do want the most efficient way to deliver a lot of the different program uses and a lot of the different features that have been discussed. As we move through in the design, again, we'll add more detail, but this system becomes very efficient for all of those. So, we talked a little bit about the modular restrooms. Those are expandable, for instance. You could put phase one infrastructure in for a certain scale of restroom facility, and then in a modular way, you could deliver, the first 4 units and then potentially add 4 more, or some strategy therein in terms of sort of phasing the restrooms. But again, in phase one, you would have restroom facilities, and that would be the goal. Same thing for seating and some of these more daily use activities and strolling. You could imagine these sort of expanded streetscape areas being the first area to bring in some of those seating, or where shade is available in sort of phase one, kind of focus furnishings in that zone along this really efficient promenade. But then as it expands, you potentially could expand, furnishings, where it becomes efficient around this promenade. Some of those could be temporary as well. Just like this space flexes for tents or food trucks, it can also flex for seating apparatus and picnic tables and things like that. There's a lot of those aspects to it as well. So talking about looking at efficient ways and strategies to bring shade into the space, bringing those restroom facilities, bringing that seating, and a lot of those type of things into the space. So, with that, I'll kind of flip over to this overall plan again. I know we went through a lot kind of fast in terms of this current plan. So we really love to hear your questions and feedback at this point, and kind of open it up for discussion.
Thank you. And so I may have missed this, but on your slide at the top, it says preferred option. So you're only going in that great detail on this one plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think what that's meant allude to is not that it is the final option or the final 30% schematic design at this point, but this is the consolidated plan from all of the feedback we heard. And some of that feedback did include, specific comments about, one of those forms or one of those layouts or another. Besides some of the detail elements, we did get, feedback on kind of those original plans that we showed at the beginning. And if you'd like, I can flip kind of back and forth. I can go to those plans anytime you'd like, if that would be helpful.
What is the occupancy, the grass area?
So we're trying to scale this grass area we wanted to have an event that could obviously not only hold all those tents and food trucks and tent, things like that, but also about 3,000 people. We know that there may be some events that even expand past that. But for that central space, we're looking at it needing to be at least 20,000 square feet in the actual turf area. But that promenade starts to expand that, right? So, people walking around the main gathering space, really gives a lot of flexibility to how many people can come in and out, even if you did have a crowd gathered for a concert or something like that. So, we're looking at about over 20,000 square feet in that area that can hold, 2,500 to 3,000 people.
And then in your plan, I remember you saying something about for a monetized event or an alcohol event for containment. Is that in your plan, or is that?
So one of the strategies, again, trying to think of these as, multi-use, a really efficient layout, but also multi-use structures, is potentially any kind of colonnade here that was carrying the power and the lighting and those kind of things would be the beginning of a potential sort of fencing apparatus, meaning, we could put real sort of cost-effective sleeving around that same ring and look at this main area as sort of like the main ticketed event. But because it is subdivided in several ways, you could also sort of put up temporary divisions of some sort in a way that basically just took this whole southern section and did something, like a beer garden where sort of the rest of the space remained open and still had its circulation. There is sort of multiple ways that you could still subdivide this. And that really came spurred from that original sort of facets design, and how could we sort of, develop space in a way that could actually have containment on several areas, not just the larger area.
Have you taken into consideration the sound, how it travels, and seems like the direction you have, the main stage area or entertainment area seems to be pointing towards a lot of residences.
Well, so we have heard that. We've heard that there's already live music across the street. I think one of the comments we got that as soon as they turn it up here at the site, they might get in a battle of the bands across the street. I mean, we understand that, that sound travels and those kind of things. I mean, I think, again, not only in orientation, but just in terms of the actual location, we did try to kind of put this into the site in terms of that main space. I actually will travel back in time here, and if I can really quick, and go to this diagram here and see those three orange dots here. And really what we're really focusing on is sort of this idea that, there's multiple locations, and it depends on what type of event, right? For what location you might use. So that main performance might not be a concert, right? It might be just the main tent where you're serving alcohol, or it might be something like a speaker that's a little bit lower volume. But our main performance area is sort of tucked back into the site. We don't want to tuck it too far because we actually want it to engage the gathering space and be accessible from those drivable routes and things like that. But yeah, the idea, I think, is the point's well taken in terms of the site. The challenge with this site, it's only 1.5 acres. So if we try to put sort of an event space in a reasonably accessible location that's uses the sort of efficiency of the site as best it can, there's only a couple spaces that potentially falls into. But in terms of orientation, to your point, again, I think this diagram was kind of saying that that different things could kind of be oriented in different ways.
I see that. All right. And again, to beat a dead horse, is this just the plan you're focusing on now? Because I saw 3 plans earlier.
Yeah, I mean, so right, exactly. So the 3 concepts that we had earlier are the ones that we got all the feedback on. And so, in terms of what was positive about each plans, and we've got, negative things about certain plans too, a couple of them were showing way too much hardscape, or, and it was, certain things were not as positive. But so we're taking all of those comments into account. And the idea is to develop this into a single plan that we can kind of move forward with. And so right now we have a concept that still needs to develop into a schematic design.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Maybe Mr. Keene, you can answer. So these, if I'm going to hold an event in, let's say, London Bridge Beach Park with the event space, and I come to the Parks and Recs department, I assume, with my plan, license, noise restraints, reasonable cleanup, barriers, that's going to be on my responsibility, no?
Correct. Yes, that's all part of the special event application and packet.
Any other questions from the board?
Nope. What's the timeline?
So the schematic design, we're hoping to move forward with and sort of refine and provide that initial package for the city to review by the middle of February. And that's also the package that we will have our consultant do the initial cost estimate on. So we've had several construction projects that have gotten really up-to-date bids here just in the last 45 days. So we have some back of the napkin ideas about costs. And that is, like we said, starting to lead toward some of these things that we're pushing for in terms of efficiency and right sizing of things. But what the rubber really meets the road when we have that plan with a cost estimate. And that's when we will work with the city to sort of decide what goes forward out of the concept to be developed for a construction package. So that from the time we deliver that schematic package, it'll take about 3 weeks more to get that cost estimate in place, we're assuming. And then we hope we can move forward from there with the approved design to move forward to full CDs. There is a baseline of amenities that we really understand need to be part of this in terms of that, what the discussion on phasing and things like that. And one of the things that we've really heard, we obviously, need to have sort of an efficient electrical infrastructure, brought to this. We want to make sure that restroom facilities, are a part of this phase one, and that those are provided, and the different levels of access and walkability, and a lot of the things that have been discussed today. And it really will be about that lighting and shade structure kind of canopy to where we really want to look for creative strategies in terms of phasing or what we can do with that budget to make sure that we sort of implement as much as possible.
So when you say you're going to bring in restroom structures, are you talking about restrooms for the full capacity of the possibilities of the space, or are you talking about just general usage?
General usage. So obviously they'd be in use during events, but to be able to flex, to 12 or more stalls needed or something like that. I mean, again, if you had 2,500 people in a space, it's hard to provide as many stalls with that. Typically, you're bringing in, extra trash cans and potential, portable facilities and things like that. But on a daily basis, the restroom facility would be there, including for those events.
Can we have either by email or those 2 pages of public commentary consolidation for our ongoing reference? I'd like a copy of that. My own comment to sort of reflect Todd's is that I think this strikes some of the right notes to me in that it's allowing for a catalyst. So various event planners or groups, business groups or festivals can come and supply their fencing. They have an area to put extra toilets if they're expecting a large enough event. They have a place to pull that boat's going to damage that grass. I just want to say that right now. Pull their boat onto the grass. And they can then, we've provided a facility that's multi-use, multi-purpose. They can then provide the extras they need to make their event what they want it to be, rather than the city providing a beer garden that's permanently placed or something like that. To me, this makes a lot more sense than trying to custom fit it to all the different potential events. I mean, stages, I find it a little bit, I don't know, I find myself a little bit out of sorts with the community when I think of Shakespeare in the Park instead of concerts. But again, a stage can be Shakespeare in the Park. It could be something that Grace Arts does in the spring and fall. It doesn't have to be a rock and roll band fighting with the bar. It can be jazz Sunday afternoon, you know. So it provides an enclosure and a shade structure and a grassy area and walkways and restrooms and various and sundry, so that those different people, when I do my Hamlet, you'll all come and see it. And I think that's what we want, is something that can be a catalyst rather than to one specific thing, to whatever anybody's imagination can bring to our community.
Thank you. So at this time, we will open it up for the public. And at this point in the agenda, I can comment on comments made earlier about, you know, part of having a Parks and Rec Advisory Board is to be an avenue for public input. And I, you know, wonder if anyone has any suggestions for other ways we can engage citizens when there's an opportunity like this, to when the city is developing a new park, for example.
Can I just ask Mr. Attenbury, can you again put those coming dates? So I know this is on our agenda forever now, right? So we can discuss it every month here. What is the key financing deadline that you were talking about? How many months away are we talking about?
Well, so roughly in terms of getting a plan that's refined enough to able to provide a cost estimate for, we think that's about 3 weeks away. And then it would take about 3 weeks for the cost estimate to be done. So that package would be delivered to the city's project staff. And then that's where the work begins to sort of take those two things and develop the portions of that design that would go forward.
So this is at least 2 or 3 months
based on that
before it's going to go before, say, city council. We have 2 or 3 months with how many? Does anybody know how many seats we've had? 70, 80 seats. Maybe the News Herald could remind people that we welcome them. That's a great place to start with public feedback. I would love to see these seats full. There are some days, and I'm sorry, there doesn't seem to be a pickleball court. But you know, there's some days that's all we have in business, and I'd rather it be a public forum, personally. Sorry.
Absolutely. Just to point to that, in terms of that process, I think that your forum is an excellent one because it's obviously live, but also people have the ability to do it virtually. But just for an anecdote of a recent project we were on, we had a project where we had 9 people attend the meeting. The survey and the documents that were delivered at the meeting were actually put online, where we got 90, and these sound like real round numbers, but it's kind of funny. We got 9 people at the meeting. We had 90 responses to what was sort of like posted from the meeting. But there was a subsequent sort of digital media campaign essentially for 3 weeks that just used the typical platforms, the city website and, posting things on the city's different platforms, and got 900 responses. And so, I think one of the things we learned from that obviously is not only that, try to reach people in different ways that they tend to like to be reached, but also sort of that opening up a window versus a single point in time is what really sort of expands, people's flexibility and motivates them to sort of comment. I guess I think that's what we're seeing more and more of. So, we're welcome or we're happy to provide sort of these, presentation materials and information to highlight, the current state of the design and, and whatever the raw graphics and things like that. So that this could be, definitely given more public notice.
Okay, thank you. And I agree that having something online in a forum for people to respond to would be great. We're going to hear from our public audience now.
I'll start over. Hello, I'm Reagan Ross with Go Lake Havasu and the Main Street Association. Just a couple of things at looking at this design, and yes, I've been at all the meetings so far, so I'm up to speed on what the proposals were, but I've heard from a lot of community members to remember the day-to-day that happens downtown. Everything in your proposal is very event-driven, and I was just reviewing the events that are happening now through April, and there's only one per month that are happening. You've got Brews and Brats, art show, art craft show, and then Desert Storm in April, and then it's too hot to use it until October. So between all of that time, there's 7 days a week that over 100 businesses would love to see people using that. So benches, of course, restrooms and shade, but it needs to draw everyday activity. So that's my main point on that. And then also, if you would like to hand out flyers, I think First Friday, I'm involved with that event, would be a great time to hand out flyers. People are downtown. It'll be, a point of interest for them. They're already there supporting it. A lot of citizens, don't read the newspaper, I have found. So you're only reaching about 30% of the community. So old-fashioned flyers work best, and then I think you'd get a better attendance and you would reach a different demographic that way as well. At those events, Brews and Brats, all the things that are coming up, I'm sure those organizations as well would be willing to hand out things. So the farmers market, I'll hand out whatever you need. So
Thank you.
Excellent idea. One thing we've done.
My name's Terry Meyer, and I want to thank Dig Studios for the effort they put in and the board. Havasu is known basically for the lake and the London Bridge and the weather. And we know the weather in the summer is not very forgiving. You look at that design, like the lady previously stated, there's about 4 months. I don't know anybody here who has a awning that sits out underneath it in July or August to be cooler. Awnings don't work here. It's better off to put sprinklers in there to run through. But anyhow, getting back to the basic concept of that and the usage that it will not have, Havasu needs something that will draw people here or downtown. That's not going to make any brochures. People aren't going to come from Phoenix, Las Vegas, or California to go downtown on a Wednesday to go to that park. I'm going to shoot an idea that could be incorporated into that. You can say I'm crazy, but I've seen it before, craziness. A Stonehenge. put a Stonehenge in there. People will come, it'll be drawn downtown. I've seen them around. I don't know if you people have traveled around the country. There's one outside of Goldendale, Washington, in the middle of no place, and there's all these 50 cars parked there. And you can go online and look at that. And it's just the idea that I hate to see that space sit there. The city has a lot of parks right now. And you look at how many of them get used in the summertime, there's not much use for them. You know, that's, you know, or in the middle of winter when it's a little cold out, a little chilly. Stonehenge, on the other hand, I'm not promoting it, but it does, on one hand, kind of tie into our English heritage here, since that's where Stonehenge is located. I think it would be a big addition if DIG could incorporate that in there, or the city would just go with that in itself. Just something to consider, I think. I know it's a little late, but to me, and I've talked to several people and they go, yeah, but I think it's too late. And I go, well, it's never too late. It's just my idea that that would draw people year round. Summertime, wintertime, you know, it'd be in the brochure if people want to come to the London Bridge, to the lake, and Stonehenge. And that's about all I have to say on that. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Build it and they will come.
Do we have any other audience? All right.
Hi, I'm Joan McDermott. I was actually involved at the very, very beginning years ago when we first did the brainstorming events. And there were two things, I guess. The initial concept a long time ago was that there would be a common shared workspace for new businesses, et cetera. And also, I think it may have been mentioned that there was a possibility for more, this would be a basic concept, and then there could be a long-term plans as funding might become available for other things. And I agree absolutely that in the summer, may not be used all that much. And it would be nice to have some other, maybe shops or something, which was in the original plan, that would bring people there in the summer that wouldn't be out in the 120-degree temperatures. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Mr. Keene, is the process from here, the very next step from here, are the consultants from Dig Studios, are they just taking this feedback, or is there another step where your staff will be relaying information to other city staff?
Yeah, our staff meets with the Dig Studio every 2 weeks to kind of just go over where they're at in this project. As far as one of the comments that it's too late to do anything, it's very, very early on in the process still. We don't expect from Dig Studio really a final product on this in the construction document in the contract we assigned with them until the fall. So while yes, we need to get those 30% so we can kind of get some cost estimates into the budget and kind of figure out where we're at. What is all this going to cost? It is still very early on in the project. So we do look at comments on Facebook as we post these different things. We, receive comments many different ways from the public, emails as well. And so we're gathering this information, getting it to Dig. In the next 6 weeks or so, we hope to have, some preliminary budget numbers to be able to at least have those conversations with the city manager as well as possibly council and move the project forward that way. But we are still very early on and in gathering that information. Again, we're trying to funnel that into one design so that yes, Dig can then get some cost estimates and some numbers put together and see, are we on track with what our budget numbers are.
So you'll be able to take the ideas about additional outreach and put those into motion.
Yes.
Okay, great. And personally, I'd really, I agreed with many of the comments made about also keeping in mind the daily use and, the benefits to the citizens just on a day-to-day basis. And as far as phasing in, the shade concept, and I saw the different pieces of that of how it could be phased in, but that is very important to include and not just think that we'll just keep adding to it. I think it should be part of phase one. That's just my opinion.
I also want to comment a little bit on summer. Yes, summer is hot. We all know it. But I was surprised in last year's meeting. To be honest, to my chagrin, I didn't really realize that it was separate, but the splash pad behind this park and how much summer use that gets. And I'd never even thought of it because I don't have kids. I don't go to splash pads often. I go to London Bridge Dog Park every night, except when I have a meeting here. And through the hottest, most miserable, humid parts of summer, there are 30 or 40 young men playing basketball on that court from long before the sun sets until long after. There are different segments of our society that use these spaces throughout the days, even in the summer. And so I think the more feedback we have of that, the better. I'd like to hear from people who use the park in the summer, any of our other parks, because I know there's a lot of them. I see them when I'm out. And we have to be mindful of all of them and what's attracting them, not just the, although I like the Stonehenge idea, not just the people from Phoenix or California, but the local people and what they're using our parks for. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, did you have a comment?
No, it looks pretty good idea. I like the daily use of it. I like to, keep it in mind for events of all types. But yeah, most likely it's going to be used on a daily basis by the citizens and people visiting, and a good meeting place. Good start.
Any other comments? All right. Well, Mr. Atterbury and your team, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the input.
Thank you. I've been writing feverishly here, so I'm trying to take all these down, but we'll definitely work with Mike to kind of further this discussion and try to get a lot of these comments included in that 30% package.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Just wanted to check in with the board on time too. I'm not sure. Our discussion on our priorities could take some time. Do we want to have that still tonight? Just want to check in.
Mr. Keene, what's your timeline? I know you have a budget coming up in short months.
Yeah, the retreat is February 3rd, which kind of starts off the kickoff of that. But we're in the planning phases for our budget. Those are due mid-February. Obviously, a lot of refinement in that process. But yes, we are a very limited board tonight. So that would be up to the board on how they would want to proceed with that.
I'd like to get some input from any of the members.
I'm happy to proceed if we have the time to continue speaking about the next topics.
Okay.
I guess my concern is just with the limited board that we have tonight, and maybe not getting all the I guess the fullest potential of our ideas expressed, with also maybe giving another opportunity to some more public outreach to garner some more public input. I know I've been at the majority of the meetings. I've expressed to Dig Studios my input. So my only concern would be maybe giving it a little bit more time for some more public comment, maybe with a little bit better advertising.
Okay.
Could we have a, like we had last year, a sort of a hand list of what is on your mind?
Yes, I'll, next month, I will give the same presentation to the board that I give to council on February 3rd as well. That kind of summarizes where we've been, what we're doing for next year. And I guess in reference to Kyler's comments, I think we're talking about the item 7.2.
Yes,
now,
the
correct?
Parks
Okay.
and Rec Advisory Board priorities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, I will give that same presentation to the board in our February meeting, and just kind of what we're, what from staff's perspective, what we're looking at doing as well.
Madam Vice President, is it
I think, yes. Vice Chair.
Vice Chair, thank you. President, Chair, whatever.
Yeah.
I move that we postpone discussion on 22-23 priorities until our next meeting.
Okay. Does anyone want to second that?
I second.
Okay. Do we have any comments or discussion on that? I want to ask if that's your presentation to City Council was not going to depend on our discussion today? Or was it? Let me put that.
Not totally. The presentation is pretty much put together. If there were items that I may have not heard from the board before, brand new items, then I would include those. But I have included the majority of the items that were discussed throughout the year. I think
more pickleball courts.
Pickleball is an item of discussion there. Something that did happen between the last meeting and here was the city did accept a $250,000 donation from an anonymous donor to build the last 4 pickleball courts up at Dixamp. So that project will be a priority moving into the next fiscal year as well. Some of the design work is underway now. But yes, but so all those types of things, really maintaining what we have. We did the presentation on the football field. It seemed like a priority for the board to spend some resources out there. So those types of things are all incorporated into my presentation to council on February 3rd.
Sounds like maybe we need to have a discussion, but we do have a motion and a second. So let's take a vote and see how you guys decide after hearing that. All those in favor of tabling this item, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Todd, are you not voting?
Sorry, I had to mute. I'll do whatever needs to be done. If we need to stick around and do it, I'm here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to vote no, just because that's how I'm feeling. It doesn't matter because it looks like we have a majority yes. I don't feel prepared to have this discussion, not having received, not having anything to guide us. And perhaps that's maybe would be helpful when we do have the discussion next month. In terms of, are we talking about budgeting priorities or are we talking about projects? Yeah, long-term plans, things like that.
A little bit of both.
Okay. All right, so that'll be in February. Okay. This is still a public hearing. Well, it's tabled? No, okay, it's tabled. So we'll move on to the next item, 7.3, which is the teen break update. turn it over to you, I believe.
Yeah, so planning is well underway for Teen Break this year. It will be held on March 15th through the 17th from 12 to 5 p.m. For our 6th through 12th graders, and will be held at Rotary Park. I know this is an item that has been asked to be on the agenda a couple times, so that's kind of really our update. We don't get into a whole lot of the programming aspects in these meetings, but that's kind of the update that I have, that we are moving forward into planning, and it's very well underway. Several meetings have taken place, and getting ready for the event.
Comments, questions from the board? So we have had some activities that haven't happened this year, like basketball. Is that happening and I'm not aware of it? I don't think so.
Not yet. We're still working on it.
Okay.
Maybe tweaking the program a little bit.
Okay. And that's, I believe, due to hiring, not having volunteers, all that kind of stuff. So I don't want that. I guess, what can we do to help make sure that programs like Teen Break happen?
Again, some of that public outreach, as we're asking for volunteers, and that word gets out, and people are willing to volunteer for that. With Teen Break, the partnerships that we've built through the number of years that the event has gone on, we do have quite a few different organizations that love to participate in that event and help as volunteers. So I do not foresee that to be as hard to find volunteers as some of our other programs have been.
I know, like the winter break camp, for example, had to be limited because of some of those same reasons. So I'm glad to hear that you're positive or thinking, anticipating that you won't have issues like that. Do we have any other comments or questions? Yeah, me too. How about from the audience?
On Teen Break?
Yes.
I can't speak on anything else.
Might be able to wrap it into Teen Break.
We don't have a call to the public at the end of the meeting anymore.
No. Okay. All right. Well, then we will move on to future discussion items. Obviously, the board priorities will be a discussion. And, maybe we need to, if we hear that certain number of board members aren't going to be available, should we reach out to see if we need to schedule it on a different date or something, so that we can have people available, whether it's on Zoom or in person? I don't think matters at all, but just to have more of our board.
Correct me on this if I'm wrong, but did we not start this discussion in December last year? Maybe. Okay.
Maybe,
so
possibly.
I believe so. So that's probably where we've sort of missed the timing, because I think the presentation from you last year was to us in December, gave us some things to think about and talk about. Then we came back in, I assume, January, maybe February, with our recommendations. So yeah, I think we're just a month behind because of how December's date unfolded and where people were. So I think we just have to work hard to catch up in the next meetings.
Okay.
And just to speak to that as well, I'm available anytime if anybody has some priorities that they want to discuss with me personally, or shoot an email of this is something that's on my mind as well. I can get back to the board that way as well.
I appreciate that. I do think it's important that as a board we have that discussion, and and give the public an opportunity to provide their input too. Which I know, that's why you put it on the agenda. Any other comments on or requests for future discussion items? I'm looking at the two of you because you guys are right next to me. Are you saying something, Natalie?
I don't think I have anything.
Okay. All right, so our next meeting is?
Next meeting is February 28th and then March 28th as well.
Okay. Do we have to move at some point anymore? Okay. Okay. All right. Do I need a motion to adjourn? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. 7:33. Ooh. I don't know. Thank you.